Hello and welcome to Dishelved with Adam White. Today I'm going to discuss Corum, the Prince and the Scarlet Robe by Michael Moorcock. It's actually a omnibus edition of The Knight of the Swords, The Queen of the Swords, and The King of the Swords. They were originally written as three novels and they're collected in this edition from Golank's science fiction. They have a whole series of his books, many of which I have, and they collect all of Michael Moorcock's stuff. Michael Moorcock is a fantastic writer. He has an eminently readable style of prose that you just fly through it. It's really entertaining. This one was fantasy. A lot of his are fantasy, but he does do some more closer to reality stuff and some science fiction. But he mostly writes fantasy, and he treats all his books as being connected. Um, you've probably heard of Elric if you know Michael Moorcock at all. I did a video a year and a half ago or more on the first of his new collected editions of Elric. And So you've probably heard of Elric of Melniboné, and he also wrote Hawk Moon and Jerry Cornelius. But Corum is kind of like an elf, in the way you'd think of perhaps Tolkien elves, but they have a different name which I cannot pronounce, much like many of the names in this book, which is what I will say I had some trouble with, is that the names of some people and a lot of the places and some of the gods and stuff, they just I couldn't even tell you the beginning of how to pronounce them. Some of them didn't have any vowels in them, so I mean, I just really um, but it didn't take from your enjoyment of the from the enjoyment of the books. It it just added to the sense of fantasy, really, because you're like, wow, this is something really out there. Because I can't even pronounce it. But he is of one race, and Prince Corum is, and he ends up with taking on some companions in his travels. I won't tell you why he goes on his travels because it's kind of a shock at the beginning of the book. But he ends up with a human, which are called Mabden, but they're essentially humans. And he ends up with one woman named Relena and a man named Jari, and they're kind of his companions through this series of books. And there's a sequel series too, which I haven't read, but I do have it, and I'm eager to read it because I really enjoyed this one. But he goes up against gods. He goes up against the humans are really kind of like the bad guys in this story, if not the gods, because the gods of chaos and the gods of law have long been at war, and the gods of chaos currently rule, and they have taken on the human race in this world uh, as kind of their avatars, and the humans are just really despicable and do despicable things. And it's things that humans do in our world. So it's pretty accurate description of humans. because there's plenty of that going on even right now, the kind of stuff that they do in here. Um, but really entertaining. I I had a hard time putting it down, but it was, like I said, it was three books in one, but uh, it was about, I think it was like 471 pages for all three of them. So they were probably 180 pages around each. So they were shorter novels, but you get them all in this one really nice collection. And like I said, he's got a whole bunch of others, which I've got a lot of, that collect his work in these little omnibus editions. And then, like I said, there's the newer Elric ones that are in hardback. That there's three volumes of that, and then he wrote a new Elric novel which came out in hardback, which goes with the ones that he wrote. But Michael Moorcock, I don't hear him talked about as much as I think he should be. He's a really good writer. He was born in 1939 and he's still alive. I've watched some videos on YouTube that have some interviews with him, and he's just a really interesting guy. Seems like a really nice guy, too. And he's been in bands, and he's written tons of fantasy, and he's been an editor for a science fiction magazine in England. And he did in the 60s and 70s, which was considered the seminal run of that magazine. I can't remember what it was called now, but um, he but he's got such a lyrical prose that it's really fun to read. I just enjoyed reading this, and sometimes you don't always get that. You may like a book, you may love a book, but not enjoy the prose as much sometimes. But I love these books because because I like the story and the characters, but B, because the prose was just so fun to read. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. But he's a really great writer, and I he's got this notion in his books of the multiverse, which, if you read comic books or anything like that, you know all about multiverse stuff. But he really started that, and he's got heroes, Corum of which is one, which is um, to say that there's this eternal champion that appears in different forms in different worlds, of which, like Elric is one of them. And there's all sorts of others, and they're all basically, Corum or the same person, but it's just them in different times and different places. But it's a not like in one universe. It's in parallel universes, so they all exist not at the same time, but yet at the same time. So it's a really interesting notion, and it ties all his books together. And once I've read more of them, I might be able to talk a little bit more about that. But so far, I've read the first collection of Elric, and I've just now finally gotten back to it in Corum, and it's just really fascinating. He does a lot with it. He has an interesting notion of the gods, um, and their relationship with reality and the worlds and the people there. He makes up these great fantastical creatures. Uh, it's just really imaginative, and he's a fantastic writer. I know I keep saying that, but I just really enjoyed reading it. It was really good. Um, if you like fantasy at all, I guarantee you'll like Michael Moorcock. I feel confident uh, in recommending any of his books. Most people start with Elric. Corum would be a good one to start with because it eases you into the notion of the multiverse and kind of uh, gives you a sense of it without hitting you over the head with it. So I would recommend the Corum, the Prince and Scarlet Robe. Uh, that would be the first one. There's another one too, I think Prince Corum of the Silver Hand or something like that, but it's sequels to these. So this one would be the first one you'd want to get. But I would recommend it as a good starting point for Michael Moorcock because, like I said, it is a lot of fun to read. Great stories, great characters, and you get a sense of the multiverse without, getting too involved in it yet. One of the Elric stories that I read had a lot to do with the multiverses, and I had some issues with that because I felt I should know the characters well. I get a sense of the other characters in this, and it didn't. It wasn't as confusing as what I perhaps had some of the issues with uh, the first Elric story that I read that was dealing with the multiverse. So I would recommend Corum as a good starting point for Michael Moorcock, but check out any of his books. He's got tons of them. He's still writing uh, a new collection of his Von Beck stories came out in December. I think there's going to be one more collection of those. They're hardcovers like the Elric set. Um, anyway, really great stuff. Highly recommend it. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed this book, even though I've spent this video trying to. But I really, really highly recommend Michael Moorcock to anyone who likes fantasy. And even if you never read fantasy and want to give it a try, he'd be a good author because it's a lot of fun to read. The prose is just fantastic. So anyway, that's all I'll say about that. I'm planning on reading more Michael Moorcock. Uh, it's he's just such a fascinating writer, and I'd recommend to search on YouTube Michael Moorcock and see some of these interviews with him because he's a really entertaining guy, and he's like I said, he's been alive since 1939, so he's been through a lot of different changes in the world, and he just seems like a really cool guy. So I'd highly recommend searching and watching for videos on him. But anyway, thanks for hanging out with me this time, and I hope to see you sooner than later.